I'm very pleased that this first briefing by this ministry is happening at the back of a milestone which we all observed on Friday, 100 days of no load shedding, a journey which yourselves as members of the Fourth Estate have been very much a part of through the regular media briefings which were convened by Minister of Electricity then, Dr. Kgosientso Ramokgopa. And therefore, thank you once again for making time to continue supporting this communication effort, which is in the spirit of transparency, accountability, and openness with yourselves and the rest of the public. This morning, the Minister is in essence continuing with that commitment, and he will be doing so as he takes up this responsibility to ensure that key developments are shared with members of the media. I think I will not then take up much more time. I would wish to invite the Minister to the podium so that we commence with today's media briefing, where the Minister will be over and above other issues in the energy space, but will be focusing on generation performance as well as distribution in the electricity ecosystem. After which his presentation will then open the floor to members of the media, both those who are in the room joining us today here and those who are following this briefing online. Minister?
Thank you very much, Tsakani. Let me also take the opportunity to extend my warm and sincere greetings to members of the media and everyone that is watching back at home. Just to express my most sincere appreciation at the continued relationship we enjoy with the media, that you are making it possible for us to be able to convey the critical message to members of the business community and also the average households, the citizens in the country, because the issue of the energy sovereignty still remains one of the most preeminent questions that is going to confront the 7th administration. As Tsakani has indicated, of course now we are a full ministry, the Ministry of Energy and Electricity, and as she has mentioned, I'm also joined virtually by the Deputy Minister, Ms. Samantha Graham Murray, who will be working with me to ensure that we are able to resolve this, what had appeared before to be an intractable problem, but we have always remained confident ourselves and ESCOM that we've got the capacity, the know-how to be able to resolve this, this important area of the South African economy. Let me also emphasize that we are going to continue also in the 7th administration with the same values that underpin the work that we did during the 6th administration. And those values is to ensure that we are transparent, so we share everything that is important with the general public. Invite comments. We're going to remain to be robust, and I'm also going to remain to be candid. So I'm not going to claim any easy victories. Will not tell any lies. We'll share with the general public, the South African people, the nature of now the energy complex, because we're not just talking of electricity, it's a much more expanded portfolio. And also just to express the appreciation at President Ramaphosa for a vote of confidence, giving us the opportunity to continue to work in this field to ensure that we get to a situation where we're able to attain universal access, we're able to achieve energy sovereignty, we're able to ensure that we green the sources of energy, and we're able to ensure that electricity and energy plays an important part in the transformation of the socio-economic fortunes of the country. I think it's important that we talk of a quadrilemma. We're talking of 4 areas that requires attention, and from one briefing to the other, I'll be isolating, if you like, one area that is of interest, and you will see today when I speak about the distribution part of it. Really, I'm talking about universal access, that every household has got a right to be connected to the grid and have uninterrupted electricity supply. I also want to make the point that we are referred to as the Ministry of Energy and Electricity. Really, if you come to think of it in the purest form, the most clinical definition, you might argue that is an anomaly, is a misnomer, because electricity is just a subset of the broader conversation or the energy ecosystem. I can imagine that the president chose this naming convention just to say to the country that although we are registering tremendous progress on the back of the implementation of the Energy Action Plan, it is important that we remain focused on the resolution of the most immediate challenge, and that is the issue of load shedding. And in the consideration of the president that instead of just hiding electricity within the broader umbrella of energy, it has to be lifted so that we don't drop the ball and we are able to continue with the speed, the scale, and the focus that has underpinned the work that we have done during the remainder of the sixth administration, the last 14 months or so of the sixth administration, when this ministry was enacted, to ensure that we remain focused on the ball. So I really thought that it's important that I foreground really what underpins energy and electricity. As you can imagine, energy is a much bigger portfolio. So today I stand before you with a new crisis that has emerged. So there's a new front that is opened. And in fact, I had cautioned about this front some time ago in my previous responsibility as the head of investment and infrastructure in the presidency. And that front essentially has manifested. So what is this new front? So we are having a situation where there are many parts of the country, there are many households that are experiencing situations from one day to the other where they don't have electricity. There are hours in the day where they don't have electricity. And the experience of the consumer is less about what you call it. So initially, we're talking about the issues around bulk, if you like, generation, essentially from Eskom side. When demand was exceeding generation, we had to use an instrument that is called load shedding. And as a result of that instrument called load shedding, it meant that we deny people their rightful access to electricity so that we are able to protect the grid, and it will be initiated for some parts of the day, depending on the magnitude of the delta, the deficit between demand and generation. If the gap is too huge, we'll go up to stage 6 of load shedding. And it means that there's extended periods, hours in the day where people don't have electricity. Now we're sitting with a different problem. And that different problem has been exposed by the fact that Eskom, the generation side, has done exceptionally well in ensuring that we are able to meet demand. So previously we could, all of us, blame load shedding, the inadequacy of the generation that resulted in households not having electricity. But now we know that this threat and the risk has materialized, has come to pass as a result of perennial underinvestment in the distribution infrastructure by municipalities. So I'm talking about your transformers and the substation. That really is the purview of municipalities. So as a result of that, and the issue of poor planning, management, from one municipality to the other, the issues of poor capacity in municipality, I'm talking about technical capacity. Like I said, also not ring fencing to some degree, because you will not ring fence all of the revenue coming from electricity just for purposes of maintaining this infrastructure. It must be shared with other infrastructure needs in the municipality. But we have seen that there's little to no investment that has been made in the replenishing, maintenance, the upkeep and the protection and modernization of this infrastructure. And as a result of that, municipalities are under severe strain. And as a result of this severe strain, they then initiate what they call load reduction. So essentially to say that the distribution infrastructure does not have the capacity to meet the reticulation demand. And as a result of that, households, as I speak to you, don't have electricity during parts of the day. So that has nothing to do with the performance of ESCOM. It has everything to do with, if you like, downstream inaction on the part of municipalities. That's the crisis that is confronting us. So we have defined what that crisis is. I'll explain to you how we intend to resolve that problem, because we can't simply fold our arms and watch when communities are experiencing significant amount of difficulty. Of course, the complexity in that space is that you have municipalities, you have ESCOM. If you were to go the constitutional approach, you'll understand that that is exclusive domain of municipalities. In municipalities where ESCOM is present is as a result of legacy issues, but also an invitation by those municipalities for ESCOM to be responsible for that infrastructure. But you are seeing a number of municipalities, especially the metros. That's where you have the center of gravity of these challenges. And I want to suggest to the country that we are likely going to see it across the country, at least in those municipalities where ESCOM is not responsible. So I'm going to focus on the distribution part. But before I do that, I think I have a duty just to share with the rest of the country the generation performance. I think it's important that I do a bit of recap. It's the 7th administration. We have had a lull for over some period. We have disrupted that cadence of me reporting to the country for obvious reasons. I think it's important that I do a recap of the journey that we have traveled, so that there's a greater appreciation that this is a continuation of that journey. So we're not reinventing anything. So it's just continuing, of course, now with a much more expanded mandate. And of course, when we went through that period of the elections, there were narratives that were peddled in the public domain suggesting that the kind of improvement that we're seeing had something to do with the electorate having a date with the ballot box. And I kept on saying that there's no relationship, there's no correlation between May 29th, 2024 and the performance on the generation side. But really, this is a culmination of the efforts that we've been making, stretching back as far as October 2022, July of 2022, when the President introduced the Energy Action Plan. All that we did when the ministry was introduced was to give it a more executive focus and essentially galvanize all the players around this Energy Action Plan and ensure that we keep to the milestone. We introduce a degree of transparency. We are able to share with the general public the work that we are doing. And the credibility of that process should not be in question. So this is part of the constellation of the work that we have been doing over time. So like I said, the President introduced the Energy Action Plan, a culmination of a conversation and engagement between the President and the various stakeholders in the South African economy, business, labor, and community, and then it resulted in the formulation of what we call the Energy Action Plan, which has got 5 outcomes. And that was made public to the country in July of 2022. Then the President took an unprecedented decision to say that it is important that within the family of the executive, he needed to appoint someone at an executive level, so an executive authority, what you refer to as a minister, in the presidency. So in the presidency, precisely because the President still wanted to be the primary driver of the Energy Action Plan. And that's why the locus of the ministry was in the presidency. And a minister was appointed to ensure that we bring additional energy in the resolution of this problem. And of course, like all scientists and engineers do, You want to understand what is it that we are solutioning for? What is the problem statement? And for you to have an appreciation of the problem statement, we made it possible for us to visit all the power stations, including Quebec, which is the one and only operational nuclear power station on the continent. Of course, Egypt is in the process of building a nuclear capacity for civilian use, and for this, in this instance, for energy generation. So we visited all of these things, and we were able to generate a diagnostic report. On the back of that diagnostic report, we were able to make a compelling argument that in the midst of an energy deficit, it's irrational for us to decide to close the power stations. For as long as they continue to perform, we must delay the decommissioning, and the cabinet agreed on that. And we also agreed on priority interventions, if you like, the low-hanging fruit. What is it that we can do quicker that can help us to ensure that we improve the energy generation picture? And of course, we used in science what you call the Pareto principle. For 20% of the effort, we're likely to get 80% of the return. We mapped these power stations, of course, under the stewardship of the board, or led by Dr. Mteto. Like I said, a very competent, exceptionally gifted board that really wants to make a contribution to the resolution of the energy crisis here. And at the time, the acting group chief executive, Caleb Kasim, and most importantly, Mr. Beking Numalo and his competent team of power station managers, and the men and women of Eskom who are located at the various power stations, identified those power stations that were complicit in the escalating energy unplanned capacity loss factor, essentially the units failing, the inefficiencies, the levels of underperformance that we're seeing there. And of course, in those stations, we also placed Kusile, one of our newest power stations, primarily because the 3 units that had gone out as a result of the failure of the flue gas desulfurization units, the country was losing out on 2,400 megawatts. And of course, we've brought those earlier than expected. And thank you very much to the leadership of Mr. Numalo. We brought back Quebec Unit Number 1 much later than expected because of the challenges there. And of course, we are using those experiences to ensure that we don't repeat, we obviate similar challenges when we were doing Quebec Unit Number 2. So that's what we're done in March of 2023. And of course, the constellation of all of these things then resulted in the kind of performance that you are seeing, a maintenance-led, if you like, recovery effort. When we went into December of 2023, transitioning into January of 2024, we took out 18% of the total generation capacity for maintenance in megawatt terms, about 9,000 megawatts, and the unit then began to return when we went into March. They were healthier, more reliable, and that's why you are seeing the kind of performance that we are seeing. Eskom released a winter outlook. They generated 3 scenarios, and they said the best case scenario of us not having load shedding during the period of winter will make the assumption, the primary assumption there is that the unplanned capacity loss factor, that is the amount of these megawatts that we are losing as a result of inefficiencies, as a result of failures. If it were to be 14,000 megawatts and below, we are not going to see load shedding. So that's what Eskom said. And then it did what it called the most plausible scenario. If you take that base case of 14,000 megawatts, you add another 1,500 megawatts of units, total units failing, you are going to get to a stage where in winter you could get to stage 2. And then they did the worst case scenario. If we were to lose an additional 3,000 megawatts on top of the 14,000 megawatts, so you are losing in total 17,000 megawatts, we are likely going to go to about stage 5. And guess what? The performance has been exceptional, exceeding our own expectation. I'll show you the numbers. I think we're sitting on average about 12,000 megawatts. So we're 2,000 megawatts better than what Eskom had predicted to be the best case scenario. And thank you very much to Mr. Numalo and the team for the exceptional work that you are doing, of course led by Mr. Dan Marokani. as the group chief executive. So what are these numbers that I'm sharing with you? So I think it's important that we have an appreciation that the year-to-date EAF, the energy availability factor, so there we are measuring, if you like, the reliability of these units. When I say reliability, units don't just fail on their own. And also we're talking about the efficiency of those units, the ability of the units to approximate the design capacity. So if you say this unit must give you 600 megawatts, if it gives you 300 megawatts, it means that you are short of 300 megawatts. The delta between 600 and 300 is that 300 megawatts. So it talks about the inefficiency. So we know that now we have moved from what was an energy availability factor of 54.9%, 0.5%, and now we're at 61.5%. So this is like 7 percentage points more, better than where we were the last time we met here. So I think it's important that we have that appreciation. So you can see that the energy availability factor, when you go week by week, month by month, now we're sitting at about 67%. So if you had to compare it with the 54%, so it means that we're 13 percentage points to the good. So this is exceptional performance by Eskom. This is not an accident. It's calculated, it's orchestrated, it's a science behind it, is the most competent, brilliant engineers that are doing this work. I think we need to have that appreciation. And remember that our intention is to ensure that we keep on lifting this EAF. Of course, we want to get to an EAF that consistently breaches the 70% mark. We are getting closer to that. There was a period in a day where we reached about 70.78%, an exceptional performance last seen about 3 years ago. So this is the kind of work that the team has done. And of course, on the back of that, we're able to register that milestone on Friday of 100 consecutive days without load shedding. It's not a moment of celebration, but it's just for us to take stock of where we came from and the fact that these interventions are working and they are beginning to illustrate that indeed it can be done, and it's done internally, principally by Eskom engineers, with little assistance from outside. Yes, there's that framework of NICOM getting assistance from outside, but fundamentally is driven by Eskom employees. And I think it's important that we have that general appreciation. If you look at the unplanned capacity loss factor, if you look at June of last year, we're sitting at 17,000 megawatts of the megawatts that we had lost as a result of the unreliability of these units. Today, I'm standing before you. That unplanned capacity loss factor is sitting at 12,000 megawatts. So we're able to recoup 5,000 megawatts. And of course, that doesn't tell you the story, because even if you look at the comparative period, the period this year and the similar period last year, you'll find that our planned capacity loss factor, there are a number of units that we have taken out to fix them. Again, now, as I speak to you, is still about 1,000 megawatts greater than what was the case before. So if you factor that number, we have recouped about 6,000 megawatts. And thanks to the men and women of Eskom, the least celebrated people, they are doing tremendous work. And we do acknowledge the work that we are doing. And we say to Mr. Ngumalo and the team, Mr. Marokane, the group executive, and Dr. Mteto, they must just stay at it. To ensure that we are able to address this question going forward. And then the next myth that we want to dispel is that as a result, this kind of performance we are seeing, it is as a result of the banning of the diesel. I said to you that we are going to be candid, we are going to share with you the numbers. What do the numbers tell us in rand value terms? You can see that week number 7, remember that our financial year starts in April, so week number 7 essentially is the second week of May. So if you look at those numbers, you can see that we spend 49 million rands, but if you look at what has been the trend line really, exactly, you can see that about 97 million rands, the comparable period. And then when you come to now, we are sitting at about 6 million rand. So I think it's important for you to have an appreciation that we are not burning diesels to levels that are unacceptable for us to be able to maintain this kind of performance. If you had to look at the amount of diesel that we spent the same period last year compared to now, we have saved 6.2 billion rands as a result of that. From the 1st of April 2024 to the 30th of June 2024, compared the 1st of April 2023 to the 30th of June 2023, the difference is that this year we have burned 6 billion rands less of diesel compared to the previous year. So I think it's important that we have that appreciation. Like I said, we'll continue to share with the general public. There's nothing about diesel that is anchoring the kind of performance that we are seeing now. It all has to do with the performance of this coal-fired power station and the work that the team has done to ensure that we are able to address this situation going into the future. So I think it's important that we have that appreciation. And then I'm going to focus now on the question, what I refer to as a new front. What is this thing that is confronting us now as we speak? We are dealing with the generation side. Like I said, we are not out of the woods yet. I've not made an absolute statement that we have resolved load shedding. I'll tell the country when we are at that stage. But we are confident about our journey to get into the resolution of this load shedding and also creating sufficient buffer for the South African economy to grow, support industry, get people into jobs, and ensure that we get the kind of prosperity that we desire. There is no economy that will function without a sufficient electricity or energy supply. So it's important that we have that appreciation that energy, electricity is an albatross that undermines the ability and throttles the ability of the country to grow and achieve its developmental ambitions. What are the kind of things that we know as I speak to you? So the first one is that there's significant movements in the world to ensure that we are able to remake what we call the electricity distribution industry. So it's an area, like I said, that has got multiple players. There's municipalities there, there's ESCOM there, but it's important that we find a way of managing that space so that we are able to avert and address these challenges, what we refer to now, municipalities refer to as load reduction. So there's a number of trends that are happening across the world. But fundamentally what these trends are attempting to do is to address what we call energy poverty. And we have reached conditions of energy poverty in the country. I'm not saying we are going to reach those conditions. I'm saying now, as I stand before you, there's a situation of energy poverty in the country. What do I mean by energy poverty? By energy poverty, I mean the following, in very simple terms. There's a generation, so the electricity is there on the generation side. The ESCOM power stations are giving you the kind of megawatts that are required for you to meet the demand. But people can't afford the cost of electricity, and as a result of that, there will be days in a month that they don't have electricity. So we can see that the tariffs are increasing and increasing exponentially, and therefore people can't afford this electricity. I mean, if I were to use the example of food, so people are going hungry on a daily basis, but you go to a retail shop, you can go to USAVE, you can go to Boxer, you can go to Woolies, the shelves are full. But the only way you'll be able to get that food is if you have the money to purchase that food. That's the problem that we have. So the shelves are full with the megawatts, but people can't afford to buy those megawatts. As a result of an electricity pricing structure that erodes significantly the ability of municipality, of households to be able to afford. So we're gradually eroding the income base of municipalities. We're dampening down the disposable income of households. Households have to make choices. Do I buy bread, or do I replenish the prepaid meter? And of course, the choice is simple. they are likely going to buy bread as opposed to ensuring that they replenish the prepaid meter for them to be able to survive. If you like, the Maslow hierarchy of need finds an application here. So there's a number of things that requires attention here. The issues of decarbonization. So there's technology that has been proven and tested, so we can do the behind-the-meter intervention, make sure that people get electricity using, if you like, our natural endowment, and in this instance, in the sun. One of the issues that I lament on a daily basis, you find that communities, as a result of the distress, the result of the anger arising from the fact that they don't have electricity on a daily or particular periods of the day, they resort to taking to the streets, they are burning tires, they want electricity, and the sun is out. The sun is a source of energy. The rich are able to buy solar panels, inverters, batteries, and they are able to harvest the sun to meet their energy requirements. The poor can't do that. While the sun is out, a source of energy, they are protesting to say we want electricity because they can't harvest that energy because they are not sitting with unencumbered cash. They can't go to the bank because they don't have the right credit profile for them to borrow money from the bank to roll out solar so that they can have cheaper and cleaner electricity. The poor are excluded. And that's why that decarbonization is important, because part of the work that we want to do in the ministry is that we know that there's a grant called INEP. The INEP grant, its primary intention is what we call electrification, is to make sure that we achieve universal access as an injunction that we draw from the National Development Plan. So we say that you need to repurpose that grant to ensure that you have non-grid solutions to be able to provide electricity access to the poor in particular. So we're going to move from the conventional approach of how we think of connectivity and electrification, because hitherto, what we think of electrification, we want the wires to connect to the households, when in fact we know that there's a trusted technology, a proven technology that we can use. You don't necessarily always have to be connected to the grid. When the grid comes, it will come at its right time. But at the moment, with this kind of, if you like, resource that we have, it's about 5 billion rands on an annual basis. We can work with ESCOM and other players. We've got a seed capital of 5 billion rands. Just repurpose it to ensure that we are able to roll out. Then you will not have people protesting, burning tires, when the source of energy is there present. But the only impediment is that they simply don't have the capital, the money to be able to buy this solar panels, use the technology for them to be able to address it. So what's the point I'm making? Is the repurposing of that, and we're going to move with speed. Of course, like I said, ESCOM and many other players have got the know-how. We're going to work on it and ensure that we are able to resolve this. Digitization, digital transformation is important. The modernization of this infrastructure to ensure that we are able to avoid technical losses. When you have distributed generation, you travel less distances, the megawatts travel less distances, and therefore you reduce the opportunity for technical losses. We'll go that route again. Decentralization talks to exactly that, the distributed grid. So you don't have to have wires stretching for 3,000 kilometers for them to be able to reach the end consumer. You can do a distributed grid. Closer to consumption, you can have an opportunity for you to generate, because technology allows you to do that, and therefore we become more and more efficient. And then democratization, which simply means that there can be new generators of electricity. We don't have to rely on ESCOM, and then there can be other off-takers. They don't have to rely on ESCOM. You have democratized the space. So those are the kind of things that we're bringing into the space. I want to say there is nothing novel about what I'm suggesting. There's nothing new. We're simply saying that they are done in other parts of the world. We are going to benefit from what I refer to as the last mover advantage. We're going to be very aggressive and address the situation of energy poverty, ensure that the poor have got the same means of access to renewable sources as the rich have. We are going to close that inequality gap so that everyone can benefit from this, and we move away from a situation of as they refer to it, as a load reduction. So that's the approach that we'll be taking, and I'm saying that this is happening across the world, so we don't necessarily have to reinvent the wheel. We take the view that, if you like, your distribution infrastructure is a strategic state asset. So it's important that we have that appreciation, because it helps you to meet your developmental goals. The issues around universal access, supporting small, medium-scale businesses, they are also going to rely on, if you like, the strength of this distribution grid, a grid that is modernized, a grid that doesn't fail, a grid that is reliable. So it's important that we appreciate that. And once you get these small businesses into a place, they are getting cleaner and cheaper energy. What you are seeing is that they'll employ more and more people. Townships are going to become hives of economic activity, and therefore they are going to contribute towards economic growth and ensure that we achieve conditions of energy security. We don't just put our eggs in one basket, that is ESCOM, but there's a multiplicity of players, and the Electricity Regulation Act does make that possible from a legislation point of view. So the Ministry of Energy is now going to move into that space and ensure that we broaden the flow of energy generation. We are able to move with speed. And we do accept the fact that the power system is undergoing radical transformation, and distribution networks therefore require a significant investment. I've made the point that a lot of municipalities, the revenue base has eroded as a result of objective factors. What are some of those objective factors? The economy is not performing at the right level as a result of the challenges of electricity supply and the logistics side. People are out of employment, therefore they can't pay for their rates and taxes. Municipalities can't collect as before, although they are providing services. Their revenue base is eroded, and therefore they can't reinvest back into this distribution infrastructure. Those are objective factors. Then there are subjective factors, those that comes about as a result of the inherent weaknesses of these municipalities. That you don't have a revenue system that makes sure that you've got a complete picture of who's consuming where and what amount, and you are able to bill correctly and therefore collect correctly. We have municipalities that have closed a blind eye to illegal connections. Now they've caught up with municipalities. That's why you are seeing the failure of this infrastructure. You've got a situation where municipalities were not able to do sufficient modeling on the number of people that are coming into these urban centers, the rate of population growth and household growth, and therefore the pressure that it plays on the distribution infrastructure. They have not been able to model that. They have not been able to increase the capacity of this infrastructure, and that's why this infrastructure is collapsing. So the point I'm making is that it's a complex ecosystem, but it's not beyond us. We've got the capacity, the know-how to be able to resolve it, but you need to have a local government at the table to help us to resolve that. And then it's important that we introduce innovations that will help to lower the cost to serve consumers. So I think it's important that I make that point. Look, the rate at which the municipal electricity tariff, the ESCOM tariffs are increasing is unsustainable. It's an untenable situation. We are seeing it even in the developed countries, the Western democratic countries. They are experiencing these challenges. There's been a wave of elections there. That people decide to go right or left is, amongst others, a function of the pricing structure of electricity. The poor are left out. And you are getting to a situation where the lower middle class, your public servants, also cannot afford the cost of electricity in this country. So as we speak now, is an affordability question. Over a period of time, you don't address it, it's a national security problem. Because people are not going to fold their arms and not be able to afford that which is their right, that helps them to live quality lives, that should support their ability to self-generate income through their own businesses, is becoming unacceptable. It also has got inflationary pressures. As ESCOM applies for these tariff increases, municipalities on the back of that, they add a surcharge. The cost of doing business is increasing. People are going to find it difficult now to afford food, as they do as I speak to you now. Many still are having a similar problem. And that problem is likely going to become acute over a period of time. And that's why we must resolve this question with the urgency that it deserves. And that's the kind of attention that we're going to give to this question. We've got a track record of attending to complex questions with speed, decisiveness, but also our interventions are efficacious. They achieve the kind of efficacies that we want. What are some of the systematic challenges on the distribution side? I've made some of the point. Is that non-ring-fence electricity business. So what do we know now? In many municipalities, so they get where people pay, that payment goes into the broader kitty of the municipality. And then come the budgeting cycle, the electricity department, they must go and bid and compete against the waste department, against road, against water, against social programs. So they are likely going to be low on the queue. So allocations, capital allocations are going to be given to those other needs, to the neglect of the electricity infrastructure. And as a result of that, municipalities, electricity department can't replenish these assets. And I'm not making a case for a complete ring fence, because the nature of how municipalities works, for those who might not be familiar with this, is that they subsidize other social infrastructure. So it's not a complete ring fencing, but there has to be a principle that says X percentage of this maintenance budget will be directed towards the maintenance of electricity infrastructure. Poor revenue management and poor payment culture, I've referred to that. So municipalities, there's no 100% billing. So they don't know, some municipalities don't know who's consuming what and what is the amount that is being consumed. And that's why in some instances, they are making estimations. So there's no appreciation of how much is being consumed where. So that's poor revenue management, because if you don't know who's consuming what, you don't do complete billing, and in fact, even those that you bill, not all of them are paying. Even those who've got the means to pay decide not to pay. Essentially, they're delinquent. You are going to erode your revenue base, and that's why a lot of municipalities are becoming illiquid, and of course, the payment culture as we know it, because municipalities are not enforcing credit control on those that can afford. I'm not talking about the poor, the indigent, those objectively that don't have the means. And I've said to you how we propose to deal with that question. And then the issue of not investing in the municipal infrastructure is collapsing, and that's what we're experiencing across the country, let me emphasize. So what we see in Johannesburg, what you see in Tshwane, I want to argue is the tip of the iceberg. That situation will become worse and worse, and in fact, it will be across the country. So the sooner we arrest this situation, the better. I've engaged with my counterpart, the new Minister of COGTA, Honorable Hlavisa, and we've agreed that we are going to pay particular attention to this. We had already started at the tail end of the 6th administration with the previous incumbent, the erstwhile minister and deputy minister there. There's a technical team that has been working on this, but before I make it public, I think I have to privilege this information, the work that we've been doing, the Minister of COGTA, so that we're moving the same wavelength. So I'm going to give him the respect and not announce what that is. But all I'm saying is that we've got an appreciation of what needs to be done, and of course we need to move with the Minister. And we're arguing that there's an unstable distribution business in the country. So there's issues of theft, what we call non-technical losses, what in colloquial terms in the township they call izinyoka. You can see, I mean, there's an ESCOM of a different type. So there are people with the expertise. Just the other day, some of them were arrested. They belong to municipalities, some of them belong to ESCOM, delinquent people that are corrupt, that are undermining the system outside the good work that municipalities are doing and ESCOM is doing. They want to earn themselves an income. They are using their expertise to ensure that they connect people illegally. So it's important that municipalities must be rampant in addressing that situation whilst we protect the poor. I think it's important. And those that can afford to pay have to pay. And of course, simultaneously we'll address the exponential rise in the tariffs structure so that there's a proper electricity pricing plan. Of course, NERSA will do its own consideration. But I'm saying that objectively, as the multiplicity of players in this space, we need to find a more enduring and sustainable solutions. And the revenues are declining, like I said. There's a need for us to reskill as we modernize this infrastructure to ensure that we produce a significant pipeline of skills that is able to address the most contemporaneous of these questions as far as electricity is concerned. That's what we'll do. And then in the course of doing that, we'll address the issues of energy security. So I'm talking about universal access. Everyone, without exception, must have access to this electricity. And like I said, we are going to deviate from the conventional way of how we understand electrification. You don't always need the wires. You can use the existing technology to ensure that people have got that electricity is more sustainable, is greener as we do those behind the meter intervention, and most importantly is affordable. Affordability is our Achilles heel. Like I said, this is what I refer to as energy poverty. More and more households will not have access to electricity, not because we are not generating. The electricity will be available in the network. They will not be able to tap into that electricity and meet their household demand as a result of prohibitive pricing. And it's important that we are able to address this and resolve the issues of energy poverty. In numbers terms, what does this mean? You can see now, year-to-date, financial year-to-date, collectively, municipalities are owing ESCOM 78 billion rand. And I can tell you a lot of this is irrecoverable. There's no possibility under the sun that we are going to collect that 78 billion rand. A lot of it is over 3 months, 6 months being owed. People are not sitting on this money. So it's important that we resolve this picture. But this picture presents problems for ESCOM. ESCOM needs this money for it to be able to reinvest back into its own infrastructure. Municipalities have to pay that money, but I did tell you that municipalities, on objective grounds, they simply don't have the means to be able to pay for that money. So in that solution, you must protect the interests of ESCOM as a going concern, ensure that municipalities are able to collect, but also protect the interest of the user. Because when that distribution infrastructure fails, that is providing electricity to 50 houses, there will be 10 to 15, 20 houses that have been paying diligently, but they are collateral damage. They are, as a result of that infrastructure failing, although they've been paying consistently, they also are subjected to load reduction. That's the problem we have. Just to give you the magnitude of the problem, is that if we don't resolve this problem, our projection is that at the current rate, by 2050, ESCOM will be owed 3.1 trillion rands. Let me repeat it. ESCOM will be owed 3.1 trillion rands. ESCOM will collapse. Generation capacity is going to be compromised. So it's important that we resolve this question. And that's why I'm saying this is the most urgent task that is confronting us. We are confident about the work that Mr. Ngumalo, of course the board, Mr. Marukan, Mr. Ngumalo in particular, and the team are doing a generation. I did say we are not out of the woods yet. Now we are working with Mr. Bala on the distribution side. Like I said, it's non-ESCOM related. The majority of it is municipality related, but we can't fold our arms. We need to help them from a technical point of view, because there's been hemorrhaging of skills at municipalities. There's been a misalignment of skills at municipalities. It's not unheard of for someone with a background of social sciences to be a head of technical services in municipalities. And this has nothing to do with the skills of the person. It has everything to do with the alignment of skills and responsibilities. These are the subjective questions that municipalities have to address, because collateral damage, the biggest victims of all of that is the end consumer, and by definition is the South African
economy. So the industry is in a mode of self-destruction. It's imploding. We are seeing it in Joburg, we are seeing it in parts of Tshwane. I am telling you, it's across the country. These ones are more elevated because they are metro spaces, the people are more vocal, the media has got significant attention. You can go to any part of the country, they are confronted with this question. The industry is in a mode of self-destruction. We must rescue it from itself. And that's why we need to make this intervention to address these questions and ensure that this is something that requires our attention. Like I said, as I conclude, part of the restructuring on the electricity distribution industry is to ensure that the social compacting. We need to engage, if you like, civic leaders, leaders of communities, so that we are able to separate those who can afford from those who can't afford, and those who can afford must pay, those who can't afford, the state must look after them, and address this question of what in the townships we call izinyok. So it's important that we are able to have a restructuring roadmap. We are working on it. Like I said, at the tail end of the 6th administration, we have been working on it. We are confident about the journey that we are taking. It's just that in this instance, you need the buy-in of municipalities, because we can't impose ourselves in that space, because it's an exclusive constitutional function. So I can't pick up a call as a Minister of Energy and Electricity and say to the Mayor of Joburg or to City Power, you shall do the following. No, you can't do it. The law doesn't allow. Even if the law allowed us to do it, we will not be that arrogant. We'll sit around the table and see how best to address this. And then I think it's important that we must review electricity tariff policy model to enhance affordability and expand access. So we're addressing two things. So expand access so that the injunctions of the NDP are met. Everyone must have access to electricity. And once they have that access to electricity, make sure that they can afford it. So addressing, if you like, the twin challenges of distribution. It's access and affordability. And that's something that is going to receive our attention. And of course, we are going to draw on some of the international experiences and the innovations that are available in the space and address this question. So what's the long and short of what I've been saying is that distribution is our albatross. Distribution is on a mode of self-destruction. And the casualties is the poor. They are the ones who are subjected to conditions of load reduction in the main. And even those who are diligent payers are subjected to load reduction. This can't continue any further. It's important that we arrest it so that we are able to ensure that the country is able to achieve its developmental objective. Thank you very much, Tiki.
Thank you very much, Minister. Firstly, for that contextual recap on the implementation of the Energy Action Plan, which has evidently addressed the severity and the frequency of load shedding, as we can all see. But also, colleagues, the Minister has importantly outlined how the Ministry intends to continue to be seized with the most pressing and the most immediate issues affecting South Africans in the electricity space, as it relates to energy poverty, which is located in the distribution sphere. With that, colleagues, I wish to now open the floor to questions from members of the media. We will follow our established protocol, which is to start with those who are with us in the room. You'll introduce yourself and the media house that you represent, and then we'll also open the floor to questions from our online platform. So colleagues, by a show of hands, do we have questions in the room? There's a microphone. Takalani, can you, Itumeleng, there's Heidi, and then you'll go to the gentleman behind the camera. We'll start with Heidi, thanks. Okay.
Hi, Tim Cox. I'm the chief correspondent for Reuters. So just obviously at the moment there's no one who isn't impressed with the way things have been turned around. there was that sort of delaying the decommissioning of those coal-fired plants as part of the plan just to stabilise the base load. And I just wondered, how does that impact your meeting the Paris climate agreement? Because ESCOM does say that it's still going to try and meet its target of reducing emissions by 70 million tonnes a year. I just wondered how you're going to kind of square that circle, given that how much emphasis there is on coal. Also, just relatedly on that point, how is your approach to this going to differ from your predecessor, who had, who made his hostility to renewable energy on several occasions quite open? Anyway, yeah.
Thank you, Jacques from ENCA. Minister, you touched on it quite extensively, but perhaps ESCOM can also come in terms of, as much as we haven't had rolling blackouts for over 100 days, Gauteng is a mess. A lot of suburbs don't have constant electricity. How is this going to be addressed and dealt with? Because it's one thing to say there's no load shedding for 100 days, ESCOM's doing a great job, but a lot of people, not even in just Gauteng, in a number of provinces, don't have constant electricity. How is that going to be dealt with? Thanks.
Thanks, Heidi. Do you have any other questions in the room before we go online?
Minister Zola Shalana from Newsroom Africa. You spoke about municipalities that are owing billions of rands, and this is not the first time we hear about this. Perhaps ESCOM can also respond in this one. What plans do you have in place to to deal with this matter? Because like you said, if it's not dealt with, then in the next couple of years we'll be dealing with the crisis. What is being done specifically with municipalities?
Thank you, Zola. Any other questions in the room? We'll take another round after we've received responses, but we'll ask Itumeleng or Takalani to take us through the questions that have been sent on our virtual platform. Do we have any?
No, thank you, Takani. Good morning to everyone. I think we have closer to 15 questions. You can advise as to how we can go about them.
Okay, so let's take all of them. It's fine.
Okay, thank you. The first two questions are coming from Ramis Omaji, who is representing News 24. And he said the minister mentioned ESCOM managed to recoup 6,000 megawatts. And the two questions are, please provide clarity over what time frame this has happened and how much of that generation recovery can be attributed to running power stations without pollution controls. And the second one is directed to ESCOM. And is there any update on the license extension for Quebec? And is Unit 2 still on track to return to service in September? And the next 6 set of questions from Elmo Cruz, Independent Media. Number 1, how many days in the testing phase did Kusile Unit 5 achieve 800 megawatts? And what is ESCOM's demand forecast for 2024? And what are the financial implications of the drop in non-ESCOM's share in total generation from 14.8% in February to 12.2% in May? And which ministry will be responsible for updating the IRP? And how much will be spent on the transmission grid this calendar year? And how many standalone microgrids will ESCOM build this year? The next 4 questions are from Chris Yeland from WE Business Intelligence. And the first one, will Minister Ramokgopa be taking over the Integrated Resource Plan for Electricity, the Integrated Energy Plan,
You were audible, Takalani.
Okay, thank you. If I can maybe go through this question again. Will the minister be taking over the integrated resource plan for electricity, the integrated energy plan, and the promulgation of the electricity regulation amendment bill into law? And when do you expect the IRP to be published? And when do you expect the IEP to be published? And when do you expect the electricity regulation amendment bill to be signed into law? And we have 3 questions from Tando Mayako from Business Day. 1, according to media reports over the weekend, the Electricity Ministry is the procurement of 2,500 megawatts of nuclear power was at an advanced stage, and that his department was finalizing the procurement structure of the new build project. And when can we expect the department to issue procurement timelines and requests for proposals for the new build project? And the financial viability of the proposed nuclear build, given that National Treasury does not want ESCOM to spend money on the new generation projects. How many, or how does the ministry expect to raise the funds for the new build? And the third question, the DA is currently challenging the NESA decision to concur with the procurement of nuclear power, with the matter set down for October this year. And considering that the new deputy minister is from the DA, will the ministry be engaging the party to consider withdrawing its court case? And the last 3 questions from Given, who is representing the Politiki post. Number 1, Minister, you expressed concerns and clarity on municipality load reduction plans. Please give us an update on Soweto debts. And is ESCOM moving in speed, encouraging consumption payment, particularly in townships? And the question is, how is ESCOM defined poor? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Takalani. So after these responses, we'll take the last round in the same format. I think we'll start with Mr. Bala on the questions related to municipality debt. He'll be followed by Mr. Ngumalo on some of the other issues that pertain to generation, and then the minister will sort of give an overview on some of the responses and the questions. Thanks.
Good morning. Let me first just deal with the Soweto debt issue. So part of the plans of ESCOM to deal with the issues in Soweto was to do conversions from postpaid to prepaid. So we are completing that program now. So effectively, the debt in Soweto has been converted to mainly to prepaid. So we are monitoring the payment levels. We're currently sitting at about 25% in terms of payment levels in Soweto. On the municipalities and the load reduction, yeah, it is an intervention, as the minister has said, that we implement to enable or to ensure that we do not overload the infrastructure. So yes, in the winter period, what we notice is that the demand on the system is quite severe from what it was designed for. That is what leads distributors to take this preemptive step of load reduction. As we deal with the municipal the issues as distributors within the municipalities, yeah, I think the investment in the infrastructure of municipalities is going to be key going forward. There was a question on the number of microgrids that ESCOM is doing. Through the INEP program, we are rolling out 33 microgrids in the year 24-25. So the number is 33. There was a question on the demand forecast for 2024. We we have seen in the last week and a half or so demand go up to in excess of 33,000 megawatts. Fortunately, we're able to ride through that storm. We are comfortable that we have got sufficient reserves to deal with the demand that is currently in the system. But the projected demand is 33 gigawatts and below. Yeah, I think I've dealt with all the questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Tsakani. Good morning to the members of the media and our Honorable Minister and the Deputy Minister. I think the first question from Reuters that deals with the delays on Commission, Minister, let me start on that one to say what we have proposed from ESCOM is that instead of focusing on the 3 small stations that were targeted to closure, we will look at the whole fleet of ESCOM in terms of dealing with this issue of achieving this. And we are quite confident that by 2030 we will indeed meet this 70 million tons of, because looking at the whole fleet, as you will notice that there is a lot of levers that we are pulling from different sides. So we are of a view that even though we are running this plant for until 2030, that we will still definitely meeting the commitment in terms of the CO2 emissions, looking at the whole fleet as well, like I've indicated. And then the second question, Chair, was with regard to return of 6,000 megawatt. I think you've clarified that one is currently on the numbers in terms of the improvement on the coal. And then more specifically from News 24 was the issue of Quebec license. I think we know now that currently the regulator is in the process of reviewing that, so we are waiting for the regulator until the regulator is giving us that feedback, so we really can comment on that. We're hopeful that the regulator would give us feedback sometimes very soon as well. And then there was also the question about Quebec return. I say that we have taken the lessons from the last year in September. So most of the work should have been done, but with the commissioning that we will do, I think the latest, it goes to somewhere in the middle of October. But we are quite confident this time around that it will go much better than the previous year. We have had some minor delays with some of the work that we needed to do there. But luckily, most of the work we could do in parallel as well on the maintenance side. So the steam generator replacement remained a key critical factor, but we are hopeful that by mid-October, the unit should be back on load as well. We will start the commissioning, obviously, during the September month. As you know, that Quebec take a bit of time to get into full power. The other question from that I need to tackle was with regard to Kusile Unit 5. You recall that Kusile in December we went into first synchronization. Obviously, for the grid code and compliance, we normally estimate to take about 6 months, which was the case in this one. We have commercialized it last week. So in terms of the questions of how long it took for Kusile to get to 800, I think the good news is that we have taken the lessons from Medupi and also from the rest of the Kusile. This unit has been giving 800 almost from month number 1 of, so as early as in January as well. So it will go, but obviously with the testing, there is some restrictions on that. So we've been getting this, especially during the peak hours. We will then move the test to allow the machine to run to full load. So I think like any other units that is coming through, we've seen it with Kusile 4 as well, that the machines performs quite well from the few weeks after it's synchronized, it get to full load, and then obviously with the testing. So it continues to deliver the full power now, but it has been intermittent now, but now we are in full control of it because there's no more testing that need to be done. I think Monde touched on the microgrid. I think Minister, those were the key ones. Yeah, it's good that at least now we are sharing with my colleagues.
Okay, no, thank you very much, colleagues. Tim, just to your first question, the second of the two questions that you have asked. So one of the things that I'll be doing, I started last week, is to engage with all the key players in the ecosystem of the renewable energy space. Now I'll be left with the external players. Of course, internally is the IPP office, DMRE, and of course the energy component of that, which is now sitting with me. What is the preeminent question that ought to be answered there is the following. What were the experiences and the hurdles associated with the previous bid windows that undermine the ability of the project sponsors to get to financial close, that undermine the ability of financiers to have the appetite to participate, that undermine the ability of ESCOM to confirm offtake. So I want us to resolve those. I don't think it's going to take us long. I really am not of the opinion of going out to the market in bits and pieces. I believe in a mega bid window. But you see, the credibility of that mega bid window, it's its ability from a project sponsor's point of view to reach financial close and also to meet the promise of the commercial operating date. And that's a function of a multiplicity of issues. And that's why it's important that that conversation has to happen. I am going to be ultra aggressive on the renewable energy side. I think we have taken a bit longer than what is necessary, so we'll be ultra aggressive. And I want to say to you that I'm a firm believer that it's the mix that matters. And you are going to see an exponential share of renewables in the energy mix. And we need to signal to the market our intention to go that route, and it must materialize. Because it's one thing to go out on a big window and have 2,000 megawatts unallocated. I will sit with everyone. We agree, the commercial banks, project sponsors, ESCOM, IPP, the certainty I'm going out. So let's show the country and the rest of the world that we can do it. We are going to be the leaders on this continent in relation to renewables. I think it's important I make that point. But it's important that before we go into the next phase, we have a full appreciation of what those issues are. Should not take us long, and I'm sure they've documented them somewhere. And collectively we agree, now we are going this route. And then we are able to announce to the market. And of course, another important component there is engagement with my counterpart, Minister Tau, because once you go this mega big window, when I say mega, I'm saying it will be bigger than the other big windows that we have seen. What scale? I'll answer that question at the right time. But I'm sure that it will not be, it will be something unprecedented. From a scale point of view, of course, consistent with the IRP. The issues around what Minister Tau, it's important that on the back of this certainty of the program going ahead, I think you need to build an industry behind that. And of course, there are complexities around whether the domestic market will be competitive, whether there's the right skills. We will answer those questions. And there has to be a substantial share of local players in the next round. So if you had to map the previous rounds, you see that there is international players. It's great that there's appetite from outside, and of course they carry the capital. But I don't think that the participation rate of the locals should be 10% here, 5% there. Communities will build you a clinic here, will build a road. No, it must be substantive. It's an honest conversation we must have. Once everyone is on the same wavelength, so that there must be predictability and certainty in the program. I think that's very important. And then the international market also know, the players know,
what the rules are, then we proceed together. I think that's very important. Of course, it's going to be a competitive and transparent process. Yes, Heidi, you are absolutely correct. So that's the point I was making, that as I speak here, there's many households that can't reach this podcast, this address, precisely because they just don't have electricity. There's load reduction. So like I said, I think it's important that we enter into that conversation with municipalities. I did say that the complexity here is such that the Minister of Energy and Electricity can't simply make the call and say, we're going to do the following. It's a function of engagement with the players in that space. And I'm not going to dilute the role of SALGA, very important. It's an important player in the mix. And we're not going to undermine, I think, the participation of SALGA and its interest to protect its members, but we say ultimately is the consumer that matters. And yes, we've got suburbs without electricity. People are paying load reduction because they are connected to the same distribution infrastructure that has failed. I think it's unfair on consumers, those who are diligent and also those who are designated as indigent. What is the threshold of indigent is determined by municipalities. I'm not sure what number ESCOM uses, but I'm just saying it's an objective number that you say if a household earns so much per month, it's in the category of indigent, and therefore there has to be support from the state. So Zola, you are absolutely right that municipalities, I did show they are owing year-to-date 78 billion rand. There's a quickest way of doing it, and the most expedient way is for Mr. Bala not to give them electricity. So you are owing, until you pay, you are not going to get. Imagine what will happen to the South African economy. Because remember, there will be businesses in those municipalities, they are paying diligently. So they are not responsible for what they are seeing. So the quickest way you can just decide we are not giving that municipality until you pay, and unfortunately, it's not that easy. It's a convenient way. I'm sure if we're running a business that does not look after public interest and has no social objective, would have switched off long time ago. But we don't go that route. I think we need to engage with municipalities. I have a degree of empathy of what they are going through, having been a former mayor. It's both a weakness and a strength. Because it can be a weakness because you are over empathic, if there's such a word. So you are very generous in understanding where they are coming from. It can be a disadvantage, but it's an advantage I want to think because we know what they are going through and we can find the most elegant way of resolving that question. So I'm confident. The Minister of COGTA is a former mayor. And when we need the issues of industrialization, the Minister of DTIC is a former mayor. So the mayors will resolve a problem of municipalities, working with municipalities. I think we have an appreciation of what it takes to resolve that. But it's not about switching off, otherwise the South African economy collapses. It's the most expedient way of doing it. Just to Helmut and Chris is that, yes, the IRP falls within this ministry. The EAP, Integrated Energy Plan, is sitting with us. And of course, the signing, the promulgation of the ERA is sitting with us. Just to say the following on the IRP. I think there's been substantial inputs that are material. And I want to say to those people who have made those inputs won't be thrown away. And in fact, I was saying to the team when we engage internally that let's occasion a platform for us to engage with these South Africans and experts who've got concerns around the IRP. And in fact, some of them have illustrated from the little reading I've done on that in fact there are fatal flaws in some instances. So we'll sit. We'll make sure that it's something that enjoys the credibility that it's supposed to anchor a document of this nature. And I'm not suggesting that it's not credible. And I'm just saying you benefit a lot from this input. So you are going to find that there will be substantive engagement. And in some of those engagements, I'll be personally present. One of the weaknesses in the space is that we move with the IRP outside the integrated energy plan, when in fact that should be the primary driver. The IRP supports, is one of the pillars that supports. The gas master plan should be supporting. We've done it the other way. So you start at the end. So, and of course the gas master plan. Those conversations must happen, very difficult. A lot of the players says, but these are what we think are chronic weaknesses in this, we'll engage with them. If it calls for a substantial review, we'll do it. I'm not suggesting that we're going that route, but I'm just saying there's something material, the modeling is found to be weak, it's not as robust, the assumptions, the underlying assumptions are found not to stand, if you like, a scientific scrutiny, will go that route. I'm sure you all know that I believe on evidence and science. And I think if colleagues bring that, I'm the first one to say yes, there has to be a substantial review. I'm saying this to the rest of the country, that's the approach we are going to take. Even if it takes us longer to get to the end, but we are going to do it correctly. And I'm not suggesting it's not been done correctly, but on the strength of what is coming through, I think there's a basis for us to have that conversation. And then to Tando, no, what was in the news on the nuclear, there's nothing new. I stood here, told you. We are with the team from DMRE at the time now. They are sitting with us. We're saying that we get into a stage of putting together a framework on procurement. That framework acknowledges the fact that the ESCOM balance sheet is weak, the fact that ESCOM will not have the ticket to finance that, so you need to find a bespoke financing instrument to do that. Of course, it must say who must be the operator. I can tell you even now, without necessarily preempting what's going to come, it will be ESCOM. So you need to manage that, and that framework answers those questions, whether affordability, and that answers those questions. So I will not move ahead. Let's allow them to do that. They had said when we were here that should have been done by March, April. We are past March and April. When I come back now that they are with us, when we put a date out, we are going to keep to that date. So it's important that the credibility of this process, whatever we do is important. The promise we make to the country on the timelines, it's important to restore, affirm, and protect the credibility of any process. And that's what we're going to do going forward. And then the Democratic Alliance has gone out to challenge the procurement of nuclear. Well, they can go. It's a matter before the courts. We'll explain ourselves. Let me address an inherent material point that it's raised in that question. The government of national unity is not a federation of parties. It's a single executive led by President Ramaphosa. And then there are policy issues that the sixth administration has passed. Those are going to be protected going into the future. So I think it's important. This nuclear procurement program, it's a government program consistent with the IRP 2019. We are proceeding with it. And the executive will defend through the Minister of Energy and Electricity our position. And any player has got a right to go to court. We'll clarify ourselves, and the court will make that determination. So yes, I think that's we have exhausted the questions as they were placed before us. Or on Helmut, on transmission, we'll get the number. I think the question was how much will be spent on transmission in this financial year. I don't have that answer now, but we will come back, Helmut, on that to you and the rest of the media houses. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Minister, and Mr. Numalo and Mr. Bala. We'll now take our last round of questions. If there are any follow-up questions, clarity-seeking questions. By a show of hands, colleagues, we've got a hand in front here and at the back, and then we'll take the online questions from Takalan.
Good afternoon, Minister. Thank you for the opportunity. Innocent from SABC Channel Africa. Just a quick one. You spoke about energy poverty in South Africa, the emergence of energy poverty. Just how important it is to democratize the space and how much commitment do you have in your department to basically deal with that? Thank you.
Thank you, Innocent.
Hi, Tim Cox, Reuters again. So just on the, taking up on the renewables rollout, and you just mentioned transmission, and I don't know how much of this you can really talk about now, but obviously my understanding is the transmission network needs about 300 billion rand, and half of that needs to come from the private sector, and that just does sound incredibly daunting, and I'm just wondering if you've got a kind of, master plan for how you're going to do that. Also, to what extent is transmission also being held up by private landowners who don't want to have the pylons on their farms? And then sorry, I'm plugging the microphone there, just last question, just about the, when you said you are going to, roll out renewables much more aggressively, does your plan to do that make it possible or even, likely that you will be able to meet these emissions targets before 2030? And if not, are you going to renegotiate the terms of this, not very generous deal you've got with the donors?
Thank you. We'll take the last hand in the room before going to Takalani.
Hi, it's Julia Evans from Daily Maverick. Thank you for organizing the meeting. I just wanted to know a bit more about the plan for a new nuclear plant that Times reported on yesterday. And then also just regarding Tim's question, or the initial question about the fact that us delaying the decommissioning of the coal plants won't affect our commitments with our nationally determined contributions. Could you just explain a bit how that doesn't affect it? Like, are we reducing our emissions in other sectors, or are the plants that we have mothballed or shut down but enough to reach that target? I would just be interested in, more specifically how it's possible for us to reach those targets. Thank you.
Takalani, please take us through the questions shared on the platform.
Thank you, Tagan. It's one last question from Municipal Independent Media. And the question is, SARM now being implemented? That should be the last question. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think the minister can take the questions. But Takalani, can you repeat that last question from Helmo?
The question is, has SARM, I want to believe that maybe it's the abbreviation of something, SARM. It says, has SARM now been implemented?
I think we need clarity from Helmo. Perhaps as we respond to the other questions, Helmo can clarify on the platform as to what the abbreviation is, because it's not quite clear. So we'll take the minister who will respond to the questions posed, whilst Helmo clarifies his question further. Oh, okay. All right, the minister will respond to all the questions, including Helmo's question. Thanks.
No, thank you very much. No, Innocent, you are absolutely correct. So although you make the point that energy poverty is something that is likely going to be experienced in the future, I make a different point. And that different point is in my own calculation. We're experiencing energy poverty as I speak to you now. So outside the issues of load reduction, you go to townships, people who are relying on grants, who are not accommodated in the indigent policy, people who live on what we call peace jobs. So these are people who offer their labor on a daily basis. So they don't have the kind of benefits that come with people who are employed permanent. So they're not guaranteed a salary, and they're unemployed. They simply can't afford this electricity, especially on the back of the steep tariff increases.
So it's important that we fashion a solution on how best to address that situation. And I'm confident that the kind of work that Monday is referred to, those microgrids, and one of the areas that we are discussing is the repurposing of that INEP just to direct it to the work that Monday is doing. So what Monday, the head of generation, must give us the confidence is the speed with which he's able to roll out these microgrids. I'm sure he has done pilots, so he knows what it takes. Ensure that the components are manufactured locally, so that on the back of this, we are also resolving a different problem. So I think ESCOM is an excellent candidate, Mr. Bala, in relation to the entirety of this INEP. Of course, you're going to have a new conversation with municipalities. They'll say, but we're using this money to fix this, to fix that. We have seen that that's not sufficient. So you spread it across 200 plus municipalities. So if you see it as just one ticket and design a program that is intended to ensure that there's universal access, but it is responding to clean technologies and is addressing affordability, the work that Mr. Bala is doing will help us to address the three questions. That's the point that I am making. So you don't have to go through traditional ways of thinking of electrification. That is the ESCOM and the municipal wires. We must think of it differently. We are reshaping that space, innocent. Tim, in fact, the size of the ticket in relation to transmission has been put to about 390 billion rands. And you are absolutely correct. The ESCOM balance sheet will not be in a position to carry that. So one of the conversations we have had with the National Transmission Company of South Africa, I think around February or so, we had done some work ourselves on what the options are, a bespoke instrument to help us to finance and roll out, address the capacity of industry to meet the speed of the rollout, the technical requirement outside the financing. So we will give that space to NTCSA to come back to us. So I'll be meeting them, I think, next week, and then we should be able to come out. So I don't want to overreach, because that's the relationship we have that will move together, I think, as the NTCSA. You are absolutely correct. So one of the challenges historically was land access. So you also have people who are speculating. So people have sight of what ESCOM is going to do, because one way or the other they are able to get into the ESCOM way of where they are going to prioritize this. So what they do, they offer farmer X this amount of money, the farmer accepts it, and then they sell it to ESCOM at an escalated price. The second one challenge we had was just a farmer saying, no, you'll not go through my land. So one of the instruments that was not used sufficiently was expropriation. So we're going to use the expropriation route, and in fact, we have found a way of doing it quicker, but without undermining our responsibility to first engage with the landowner and offer what we think is market-related. If he or she says no, we expropriate, and then we move. That's what we are going to do. We've done that, if you like, a value chain of what is required for us to roll out, and there are those things that are within our domain. We will move with that expropriation, but I'm confident that we will get less resistance. And then on the emissions target, yes, I think once we go this route on renewables and the like, is going to help us on the reducing the emission, Julia. We're confident that if we get the scale and the pace of renewables, I think it's got a way of offsetting, if you like, the delayed decommissioning. But what Mr. Nxumalo said, even our modeling suggests that we should be able to meet the 2030 targets. It could be that by 2027, 2028, we are not yet there, but by 2030, Julia, we think that we should be there. And Julia, on the nuclear program, I did say that let's allow the team to work, and once we agree on the framework of procurement and all of those questions, important questions we have asked, we'll be able to share with you. I did say that that value system of engagement will remain even in the 7th administration. We're going to be candid and transparent. I won't hide anything from you, the general public, so that we get to know what we're getting ourselves into. We're not getting ourselves into some of these programs with our eyes closed. will forever protect the sovereign interest. Everything is going to subordinate to the sovereign interest. And like I said, there is nothing to be hidden about the work that is done by the ministry. And in fact, if anything, we'll be engaging you more. On the SAREM one, I was advised by the table there and says it's a master plan for renewable rollout. It's an ongoing program, Helmut. If this answer is not sufficient, I'm sure we'll come back. But like I said, I mean, when I answered Tim's question earlier on, it's just to understand what has been our experiences with the various bid windows, how best do we correct those, and then we are pushing now so that we signal to the market, we are able to build the industry behind that because there's an appreciation of scale. But what is important is that you must deliver on that program because it's the credibility of the program. People won't believe statements that I'm making. They'll believe when, in fact, the program is indeed rolled out. We move quicker, financial close, and then private sector must meet their commercial operating date and all of that. Everyone has got an obligation. We'll meet our obligations, and that's why we're saying that we need to engage with private sector so that they meet their obligations. If anyone meets on defaults on his or her obligation, this program will be discredited. So it takes more than two to tango in this instance, and that's why you need to pull them in a room. And that's a new invention, is that we are pulling everyone in the room. We're talking quite candidly about what the issues are, what the responsibilities are. We iron those out so that when we go out to market, there's certainty, there's predictability, and then the program is able to move. But once more, let me take the opportunity to thank you. I see that the number of questions were close to 30 is because we have not seen each other in a long time. So I'm back. Thank you.
Colleagues, with that, we have come to the end of today's media briefing. We will continue, I'm sure the Minister will continue to maintain a high communication availability factor. We'll have more of these regular media briefings. So colleagues, once again, thank you very much, and we'll communicate the details of our next briefing with you as we always do. Thank you.